Okay, Alexander, let's talk about what is being dubbed a historic event, a historic diplomatic event. Let me read you the title via RT. Trump says historic Israel-UAE deal on diplomatic ties will suspend Israeli annexation of Palestinian lands. Donald Trump tweeted out a joint statement of the United States, the State of Israel, and the United Arab Emirates. And, well, Alexander, there you have it. It looks like Trump has negotiated something that previous presidents could not negotiate. What do you make of this deal?
Absolutely. I mean, so this is a huge step. I mean, the thing to say is that the US has been able to negotiate recognition of Israel with some Arab states, I mean, like Egypt and Jordan, but up till now, the Gulf states, which remember are monarchies and Islamic monarchies as well, have held firm against doing so, even if they have, in private, lots of contacts with Israel. But Trump has managed to get the UAE, which is one of the most influential of the Gulf, in fact, a federation of monarchies, to agree to diplomatic relations with Israel. And as far as I can see, the Israelis have not had to give anything in return. I mean, they said that they won't move ahead with annexation. I'm sure they will eventually move ahead with annexation. By the way, I should say I don't agree with that, but I'm sure the Israelis will do it. And at the same time, I mean, they're not giving up any control. So it's an absolute win for Israel. It's an absolute win for Donald Trump. He will very much please many of his voters in the United States who strongly support Israel. So it's a very big diplomatic win for him. And I would point out too that when not so very long ago he recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, there was a massive and furious reaction in some quarters, and people were saying that this was going to wreck any chance of the peace in the Middle East and was going to, make huge problems with the relations with the Arab states. Well, here's the proof that it hasn't done so. The UAE, an important Arab state, even if it's a small one, has now recognized Israel and is moving towards establishing diplomatic relations. So from a political point of view, Trump wins. From a diplomatic point of view, Israel wins. What the United Arab Emirates gets, I'm not really so sure, but presumably from their point of view, it's always good to be on good terms with the United States.
Let me read you the first 2-3 paragraphs from RT, and then I'll ask you a question as to what you think UAE gets out of this, because I'm also having a hard time understanding exactly what they got. Anyway, Israel and the UAE have restored diplomatic ties after inking a deal with the U.S. that will see Tel Aviv temporarily shelve its annexation of the West Bank and Jordan Valley to focus on improving relations with its neighbors. At U.S. President Donald Trump's request, Israel has agreed to suspend its plans to officially engulf large areas of the Palestinian territories and instead focus on, quote, expanding ties with other countries in the Arab and Muslim world, end quote. According to a joint statement released by the three countries on Thursday, Trump announced the, quote, huge breakthrough on Thursday following a phone call with Israeli PM Benjamin Netanyahu and UAE's Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed. Alexander, okay, I mean, do the Palestinians get something out of this? The Palestinian territories?
No.
Do you think there will be an end or a temporary pause to the annexation? You said you don't think so, but...
Well, there will be a temporary pause. But Israeli control is not going to slacken. And sooner or later, the annexation drive is going to resume. That there's no doubt at all to my mind. I mean, what has happened is that the UAE has given something concrete, which is the agreement to establish diplomatic relations with Israel and in effect to recognize Israel. And Israel has given something token, which is an agreement to slow walk the annexation of the Palestinian territories. But that's the reality of it. I mean, it's a concrete concession from the UAE in return for a token concession from Israel. The Palestinians, if I have to say it frankly, have been shafted. I mean, I don't see they've gained anything from this.
This is obviously a political move on Trump's part. I mean, for the elections, this is going to he's going to use this heading into November.
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
I think that's the driving force there, is it not?
Absolutely.
Or is there a Kushner element to this, or donor element to this?
Yeah. I am sure there is. I mean, I'm sure this is partly Kushner's work. I mean, Kushner is the person who is the lead person on negotiating all these deals with the various Arab and countries and with Israel. But I mean, it's quite likely that he's been the person who's done a lot of the thinking and talking. But whoever was responsible, they've managed very well. And I can't help but think that what underpins all of this is that for the Gulf monarchies, the overarching issue is no longer Israel, it's Iran. They're focused overwhelmingly on Iran. So they feel they need the support of both the United States and Israel in this confrontation they find themselves in with Iran. So they're prepared to make what would have been once upon a time unimaginable concessions to Israel and the US on an issue that for many Arabs was and remains of existential importance in order to ensure themselves against Iran. So, Donald Trump has leveraged it, and he's scored a big diplomatic win and also a political one. It will certainly help him in the run up to the election. It's the sort of thing that some American voters who are very pro-Israeli will take very seriously.
Right, and a lot of donors will take seriously, but big picture.
A lot of donors will take very seriously.
Big picture. You mentioned Iran. Is this a sign that a Trump administration will pursue more aggressive action towards Iran, possibly even military action? Is this a sign of that? This is the first deal. Maybe. I'm just saying. That's my first question to you. My second question is, how do you think other Gulf states will react? Is the UAE the first one of many now, or will it stop at the UAE?
I don't think it will stop at the UAE. The big question is not whether it will stop at the UAE. I'm sure other Arab states will follow. I mean, I'm sure that countries like Bahrain, for example, and Qatar, well, maybe not Qatar, but Kuwait, Oman, will probably follow suit. The big question is whether Saudi Arabia, which has aspirations to lead the Muslim world, will go down this route, even though in private, the Saudis and the Israelis are known to have very, very close and friendly relations with each other. But, we will see what happens on that front. But you're absolute. Now, turning to Iran, what this will do with, the situation with Iran, I don't think it means that there will be an American attack on Iran. I don't think this is what this is. We shouldn't see it as a signal that an American attack on Iran is coming. What it does mean is that this very strong line that the Trump administration is taking against Iran will continue. And we can see that by taking this very strong line, the US, or at least the Trump administration, is gaining political dividends. It's been able to get the UAE to recognize Israel in the run-up to an election. And of course, what will now be happening is within the US, in the run-up to that election, Donald Trump and his campaign team will be telling voters of pro-Israeli voters and pro-Israeli donors to an even greater extent, support me because you see what I achieve for Israel. I've got Israel, its capital, Jerusalem. I've got Israel recognition from the UAE and in the future from other Arab states too. Look at the other side, look at Joe Biden. He still hankers for some kind of deal with Iran. And of course, the Democrats, they have people like Ilhan Omar and people like that whose views on Israel are very different. So I suspect, as far as I can see, Trump wins in every conceivable way.
A final question before I forget. Taking a look at Israel, internally in Israel, Netanyahu has been having a lot of trouble and is still undergoing a lot of trouble. There are a lot of protests going on in Israel, or were going on. I'm not sure if they've continued.
I think they are.
Those protests were focused around the lockdown, the economy, and Netanyahu himself.
Yes.
Do you think Netanyahu gained something out of this, in that maybe his approvals will go up, or maybe some of the protests will calm down or die down, or none of that will get affected with
I don't think it will have a huge effect, because I don't think there's any great bipartisan difference in Israel about foreign policy. I think all the big parties basically support these policies. Now, Donald Trump and Netanyahu have a very close and strong relationship. And Netanyahu will be able to say, look, I have this very close relationship with Donald Trump, and see what benefits Israel gets from this. So if you want security, if Israel needs its long-term security, and it needs to you want to secure Israel's position in the Middle East, I am the man who will do that for you. Keep me there. So it can't do him any harm. But I think ultimately the protests in Israel are driven by pure domestic politics and pure domestic issues. And I don't think this is going to change that picture very much at all.
All right. So we'll leave it there, and we'll be following this development as well. Alexander Mercouris, thank you very much. Guys, if you like this video, click on the subscribe button down below. Smash that like, drop us a comment as well. We really, really enjoy reading your comments. Also, please donate to us on PayPal, Patreon, and Subscribe Star. Your donation helps out this small channel as we try to bring you all the news we can from all around the world. We try to cover all types of places, all countries. Send us some help. And, of course, go to the Duran shop, where you also help us out when you purchase a magic mug, magic hats, shirts, all kinds of things. My mug is Serbia.
And mine is Australia. So you get lots of magic mugs now, all the best mugs in the world, let me remind everybody, but they're getting even better with lots of flags. If you can't find the flag of your own country there, wait a little, because it's almost certainly coming. If it doesn't come very soon, then drop us a line and we'll see what we can do. But they are amazing mugs. Some of them are now enameled. They are, the best mugs anywhere. They come in all sorts of sizes. This is a smaller one now for Greece, which you could see, but this is 11 ounces. Most of our mugs, like this one, is 15 ounce. So you can see the difference. But, they're both perfect for drinks. This for perhaps more like an espresso coffee, this one more for maybe a filter coffee or perhaps a tea. So you can see what wonderful mugs they are. And we also have our amazing shirts, which are also being expanded. We've got wonderful new range of shirts, embroidered shirts also coming, and we've got embroidered hats, which are also there, amazing embroidered hats, and we've got more and more ebooks, and we've got hoodies and stickers as well. We've got amazing things in our shop. You support our little channel by coming to our shop. You own these great things by coming to a shop, and Alex will remind you how to do that.
Just go to the duranshop.com. You'll find the link in the description box down below. Alexander Mercouris, thank you very much. Until next time, everybody, take care.